I'll just introduce myself extremely briefly. My name is Rachel McGregor. I am Digital Preservation Officer at the University of Warwick in the United Kingdom. And I'm delighted to be here to chair this session. If I could ask everyone who is not about to speak to mute their mics, and if you've got questions or comments, use the chat box. A reminder, this is a formal and fun, not a conference. I'll be using a comedy noise possibly for timings, so that's my main role, as well as to introduce the speakers. A reminder, it's an inclusive and diverse welcoming environment. I'd invite you to look at the inclusion and diversity policy to see more about that. And bear that in mind in the discussions. This is stream 1, digital preservation in 2021, which is looking forward to what's coming up ahead, like any of us know that, which I don't think we do. So I'm really looking forward to hearing from the speakers on some new and exciting work coming out. And without further ado, let's get my timings involved. So each speaker will have 8 minutes, which I think they already know, and so I'll just get that set up, and I'll just prompt you at the end a minute before. And I'd like to invite the first speaker, who is Hannah Bosma from the University of Amsterdam, up. I realise that's not on the programme. Sorry, I should have mentioned we do have an apology from Jens Kruger, who was not able to make this session, not able to be here, unfortunately. So I'm going to now invite Hannah Bosma, who is second on the bill. Hopefully our first speaker will join us later. Do we have Hannah in the room?
Hello.
You do? Yay! Great, excellent. Hi. Right, Hannah, can I hand over to you? Are you wanting to share a screen? Have you got?
Yeah, I want to share my screen if you don't mind.
Okay, so if I think John can make that happen for you.
Hi Hannah, you should be able to do that yourself.
Okay, I'm doing it now. Yeah.
Rachel, our first speaker is on her way. Oh, here she is now.
Oh, she is. Hi, Zeffie.
Hello.
Yeah, hi, just to say, we've just swapped you around, so you'll be up next.
Okay, good.
Yeah, so just take a breath. Okay, and so without further ado, over to Hannah. Thank you, Hannah.
Hello, everyone. I don't see myself now, but you see me probably, and you see my slides. My talk will be about a new plan for what we call an online intermediate niche community network archive for STIJM. And unfortunately, Dick Rijken is not here. STIJM is a small arts organization, and they have serious problems with funding now, so he has to work on that. And that's already interesting in terms of preservation, because the time span of organizations like this in terms of funding is at most 4 years and often less. So that has huge implications for preservation, of course, but we will go on in a positive mood. So I'm doing this as part of my research. It's a postdoc research at the University of Amsterdam on the presentation of preservation of electroacoustic music. And STIJM is one of my case studies. Before I start with STIJM, I want to make a few general observations. The preservation problems with electroacoustic music are huge. And they are not only related to digital vulnerability and technological obsoleteness, but they also relate to the new aesthetics and practices of this music that are experimental, innovative, performative, interdisciplinary, and there are few conventions, standardization, documentation, and there's a lot of improvisation, and ephemerality is also in the aesthetics. So this goes difficult together with protocols and standards, and also different media and different disciplines need to be combined if you really want to preserve this practice. My last remark is about this conference. It's about digital preservation, but in my opinion, and at least in electroacoustic music, the digital is not an isolated entity. A digital heritage is always embedded in a non-digital context. And this music almost always nowadays contains digital elements, but is seldom exclusively born digital. Moreover, in the past, in electroacoustic music, they started very early with digital technology, but in close relation to analog technology, and they are often intertwined. So, back to STIM. STIM stands for Studio of Electro-Instrumental Music, and they call themselves a network laboratory for experiments in sound art and electronic live performance. It's based in Amsterdam, and it already exists more than 50 years. Here are a few of the instruments they made: the Crackle Box, the Crackle Synth. Those are analog electronic instruments that you can touch by hand. And on the left side, you see the hands. Those are digital interfaces for synthesizers and computers that can be played in performance. There are many versions of this instrument, and it really developed, and there was also software developed for this, of course. So what you see already here is that there are many aspects to it. They made an instrument, but they also made music with it, compositions and improvisation. They made software for it. And there is also an aesthetics, a philosophy that they call touch. So here you see that this is not only a STIM thing, but it is also related to other organizations, other institutes, and this is just a simple example, but this is for a lot of things they are doing. So what is STIM now? It's a network laboratory. So they have some staff, a few people, but they have a lot of artists in residency that came there during the last 50 years. Also interns, and they gave advice to artists. And artists developed their own thing. They came there, they took their thing, and they took it back home when they left. An important activity of STIM is also the organization of concerts. And one of the things they also did to make it lively is to have changing artistic directors. So there are a lot of people involved in STIM that not really work at STIM all the time. And these are called the Friends of STIM. The pictures you see here are photos of the festival of their 50th birthday. And all old artistic directors came there to make music and to play and to give workshops, etc. So what is the archive then? Well, they have paper documents, they have a lot of audiovisual recordings, a digital archive, they developed a lot of software, they have instruments and objects, but very important is also that there's a lot of knowledge, practices and experience in the hands and the heads and the bodies of people. And moreover, all these friends of STIM also have their own documents, objects and information. And you could say that also in a way belongs to the archive, the virtual archive of STIM. For STIM itself, when you ask them what is your archive, they always say they start with their audiovisual recordings of concerts and also of some presentations. Well, this is not easy listening music, and there's little information with these recordings. So the question is how to make this accessible, how to preserve this, but to understand those recordings and to understand what is happening there, you need much more information. So that way we got the idea of the online intermediate niche community network archive. The idea is that STIM starts with putting online these audiovisual files, but that the friends of STIM from all over the world can add information and digital items, such as photos, video, audio, documents, text, software, etc., etc., and link all these items. We want to make this archive as open and accessible as possible. And for that, we also need to be able to fine-tune the access and the rights of the people who participate. We applied for Mondrian funding, Mondrian Fonds funding for pilot study. And we would like to focus on 3 aspects: the social organizational, so how to involve these time friends, how to keep them going. And
Johnson's baby was baptized Catholic.
what? Sorry?
I've muted them. I think it was just a mistake, Hannah. You can just continue. Sorry about that.
We have also questions about the technical aspect, which system, and the organizational aspect, where to host it. So what I would like to ask you with this presentation is, please contact us if you have experience with such a community network archive. We really like to hear from you. And we have specific questions about the digital system that we might use, like OMKS or MediaWiki, or a custom-made graph database by Webtic. So thank you, and please keep in touch.
Thank you very much, Hannah. That was great. And can we have a quick virtual round of applause for Hannah? I'll just do mine there. That was great. Now we have maybe a minute just for any questions that might have come up. I don't know if anyone has any in the chat. I was certainly interested, Hannah, to know, I was reflecting on, I guess, there's probably quite a lot already lost. Would you say that was true? I was thinking about how far back it goes. Obviously the organisation goes quite far back, but the experimental nature of it, is that meant that you're aware that, you know, you're aware of what you've not got? I don't know, maybe you'd like to reflect on that.
Yeah, for example, Michel Weisvies, the composer I mentioned, he was the director for a long time. And for a long part of his career, he had this philosophy that he didn't want to release CDs or other recordings.
Right.
Because of this philosophy of live presentation and touch and being in the moment. And only at the end of his career, he released some CDs. But there's a kind of double side, because they also made a lot of audiovisual recordings. And not only they themselves, but also, for example, radio stations. So there are recordings everywhere, all over the world. And so this is also a reason to look further than only their own organization. But of course, things are lost. And the most difficult, of course, are the objects, the instruments themselves. Because they take space and they're difficult to keep. And also because they're always a very open organization. A lot of people come there. There's not much of control or whatever. So a lot of things were also taken away, I think. When I go with them to look at the object, they say, oh yeah, oh no, that's the way. And a lot of people took things to build new things, for example, but also, yeah. But there are still a lot of things, much more than I expected, actually. Mm-hmm. But we have to search, because this idea of what is the archive, this is a very difficult question. People have different ideas of what it is.
Definitely, and we could have a whole session on discussing where those boundaries are and the gatekeeping and all the rest of it. But thank you, Hannah, that was great. And we'll have time for more questions at the end. So if people are kind of thinking through some things. And I see that we do have Zephy finally, which is brilliant. Thank you. Hi, Zephy. I'd like to move on to introduce our next speaker, who is Zephy Cavadia. I hope I've got that pronounced correctly, from the International Institute of Social History. And she's going to talk about capturing social media, and particularly looking at the tools used. This is a subject that I'm sure a lot of people are really interested in. So I don't know if you want to share your screen, Zephy? Or
yes.
If you're, yeah.
Yes, of course.
Okay, that should be enabled to do that. And as I did with the previous speaker, I'll just give you you'll get a little noise at 7 minutes, and then I'll come in at 8.
Great.
So
Thank
hopefully,
you.
yeah, great. Okay, over to you then. Thank you.
Here we are. Oops. Hello, everyone. Today I would like to present to you some of the findings and some of the insights that we have accumulated over the last months in a project that we undertook with the Dutch Digital Heritage Network and the International Institute of Social History, looking into social media archiving tools. First, I would like to give like a very brief introduction of the International Institute of Social History. For those who might not know us, we are a research and collecting institute in Amsterdam, the Netherlands, founded in 1935, conducting scientific research in labor and social history, and also preserving collections in labor and social history. So the goal is twofold: to promote research, but also to preserve heritage and memory. And social media archiving is very new undertaking for ISSH, but very important for the mission of the Institute, which is to document contemporary social movements. And as we know, these are sometimes even primarily these days active on social media. The tools project that we have been working on is being funded by the Digital Heritage Network of the Netherlands. There are different partners. We specifically at ISSH are researching social media archiving tools. We opted to look into free and open source tools only for this particular project. And also we decided that we would only focus on tools for capture. That is, tools for preservation, processing, or access were in principle excluded, even though we did look into some of those incidentally during the experimental phase. We have organized some questionnaire sessions that were actually pretty successful, I think, a webinar, and our final report is coming in November 2020. I would also like to give you some details perhaps about the criteria for the tool selection. On the one side, we had some criteria, some more general quality criteria for the tools. That would be some degree of user friendliness for users with an average IT level of skill. So not a very steep learning curve. Reliability in the sense of being able to use the tools in production, given proper maintenance, systematically. Scalability in the sense of being able to use them for smaller and for larger captures in a dependable way. And security in two ways. One would be protecting the capturer themselves. Let's say you have used a Facebook account to log in and capture Facebook. Are these credentials going to be stored in the final output that you get? And also in the tool itself, some kind of access controls for who gets to see what. So different access levels or roles within the tool. And then more specifically into what we were looking for preservation of the visual aspect of social media, the look and feel, information, structured information, password protected content.
Hi, Zephy. Sorry, I think your slides are moving forward. We're still on the first slide.
Oh yeah?
Just to see if that you could.
Do you see them now, moving or not?
It's still in slide 1 for myself, sorry.
Oh, okay, let's try it again.
Sorry about that, I catch you mid-floor.
No, that's actually really good that you said that. Let's do it again. Thank you for letting me know, actually. How about now?
It's still the first slide.
I'm actually sharing the, wait a minute.
We're seeing your desktop view, Zephy, which is fine actually, provided you just click through the slide selector. I think that'll probably be fine.
Yeah, that's probably better, right?
Great, sorry about that.
No, that's actually really good that you let me know about this. I thought the presentation view of the Google Slides was working, but apparently it's not.
Well, it's your timing, so don't worry, you've got time.
Okay,
Yeah,
okay,
no,
good.
you're fine.
That's
Yeah.
really good.
Yeah.
So I'm gonna do it manually this time. So can everyone see the criteria slide?
Yeah.
Cool, great. That's awesome. Indeed, the functional criteria we were looking for were capturing look and feel, capturing structured information, password protected content, audiovisual media in terms of capturing it in the context of a page, but also being able to extract video or audio. The more interactive part of social media pages, let's say the hover over graphics or the menus, we were looking for output in an archival format, or at least in a widely accepted and adopted format. And also we were looking at some internal logging and documentation capabilities within the tool. So the tool being able to give us some kind of log or record of exactly what it did. And finally, being able to integrate this in our existing workflows. To do this a little bit easier, we categorize the tools into two categories, which can also be seen as two broad approaches to archiving social media. One of them is the look and feel. So you preserve the pages and you use browsers to crawl and to capture the content. And in the end, you usually get a WARC file, which you can replay and navigate exactly as you would as the front page end user. The familiar picture of social media we all use. And then the other is the more structured data approach, where you connect to the social media API and you make a query and you get data in JSON or CSV or Excel form. You need authentication for your app, which can be difficult with some social media platforms, but it is indeed also a very popular way of getting content. So the comparison for us, in the end, it comes down to what the pros and the cons are. With APIs, we can do a lot of large-scale collecting, and also the end product is very usable with data analytics tools. But it does lack the visual experience of navigating the pages, which sometimes can be as informational as the actual, I don't know, textual structured content. And the platform terms and conditions can very severely limit our ability of what we can actually capture. And on the other hand, we saw that crawling social media and storing it in works can be really easy to replay, and to be accessible even for people with not a lot of technical skill. But it can be also difficult for large-scale collecting, as the automation of the crawling is not always up to par, let's say. These are some of the tools that we tested. I'm not going to go into a lot of detail into those. I just put them there for reference and for maybe inspiration for anyone looking for that. So this is a selection of what we tested. And I would like to move on to some of the conclusions that we are now coming to as we are rounding up the research. We think, by what we have experienced by using these tools, the platforms can be said to actively resist archiving. I mean, maybe that's a given for people that have tried it in the past, but I think it's worth mentioning again. APIs are quite restricted in the access that they offer. They do not offer a lot of accommodations to researchers and to people interested in information management and preservation. Twitter does for some, up to an extent, but maybe not to an extent that we would want. And they are very tightly controlling how the data is disseminated. They also constantly changing their front end and the back end, making it really difficult to keep the tools functional. So the open source tool especially struggle a lot. And now more specifically into the criteria, the more functional criteria, scheduling of captures is not something that was supported in most of the tools. I think
I could just get you to start wrapping up now, Zephy, if that's okay. Yeah, no,
good.
That's fine. Yeah.
And we did not see a lot of documentation features, and then we also had some issues with trying to capture non-Latin scripts, specifically Arabic, for example. So that was also interesting for us. And I would like to conclude with some considerations for those also in the same position as we are. These are some more like general things to keep in mind that we believe would make the process easier for starting to use social media archiving tools and building social media archiving program. Organizational readiness is very important, I would say, and prioritization. Planning, because you have to know why you're doing it in order to choose the right tool. Document everything, because the tools themselves will not do that for you most of the times. Try to be inclusive in the sense of, for example, non-Latin content. Flexible, you will need to learn more than one tool. You will need to learn things you probably are not familiar with if you're not very technical. That means you have to invest in people and in skills building in the long term, and also to maintain relationships with the people creating the social media you want to capture a lot of the times, because a lot of the times you will not be able to capture it without their help and without some kind of access or gatekeeping, let's say, from their part. These are our conclusions, and thank you very much for listening, and hopefully we can also provide you with some more interesting insights in November.
Thank you very much, Zephy. There was a lot in that, really interesting.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, and I'm sure I've certainly got questions, but I think we have one in the chat box. I don't know if Sarah Thompson's asked a question. I don't know, Sarah, if you're on the call and you want to ask it in person, but if you don't, I don't mind reading it out.
Yeah, no. Sorry,
Yep.
not used to speaking to people. Yeah, I just wanted to ask if you're publishing this case study, this project anywhere else, Zephy. It's super useful, I think, in making the case, especially if you can point to other work for what tools work better for which types of content would be really useful.
We will be publishing the report in the Netherlands to be circulated among Dutch cultural heritage institutions, of course.
Right.
But
so I should learn Dutch.
No, it will be in English because I don't speak that much of Dutch yet. So I cannot write it in Dutch at the moment.
Okay.
So it will be in English, and it will be hopefully also disseminated internationally.
Excellent.
So I think, yeah, if for people interested, or I think it can be useful, because we are going to, it's going to include some, let's say, reviewing also of tools and some comparisons and some use cases of how we experimented with them. So I think it's going to be pretty useful.
Yeah,
Definitely.
super useful. Thank you very much, Zephy.
Thank you as well.
Thank you. Right, that was great. Could spend a long time on that, but we have to move on. I know we have Anya and Carl here, so I'll move straight on to introducing our next speakers, who are Anya Melenda and Carl Wilson, speaking on behalf of the Dutch Digital Heritage Network. And they're going to be talking about a virtual research environment with preservation tools. So I don't know if who's going next.
I'll start.
Oh, great. Brilliant. Yep, and you know the score. You'll get a funny noise after 7 minutes. So I will disappear and reappear then. So over to you, Anya. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Welcome, everyone. So good to be here. Oh, wait. Can you see my slides? Okay.
Yep.
And they were moving, right?
Yep, they were moving.
Great. My name is Anya Melenda, and I'm a project leader of preservation tools research project at the Dutch Digital Heritage Network. And within the research, we're focusing mostly on pre-ingest and ingest tools. And today with Carl Wilson from Open Preservation Foundation, I will show you a project that we've been developing for the last few months. And it's the virtual research environment with preservation tool. tools, which is essentially a plug and play virtual machine with a number of pre-ingest tools already pre-installed. I'll tell you briefly about the background of the project, and Carl will follow up to explain the more technical aspects and give you a brief preview of the virtual research environment. So the project is a collaboration between Dutch Digital Heritage Network and Open Preservation Foundation. We started it in March this year, and we scheduled it among 5 sprints. We are now towards the end of sprint 4. So you can expect project results over the coming months. And what we have right now is a working prototype, which has gone through the first round of internal tests and improvements. We've also added some tools in the last few weeks. Yeah, we're looking forward to finish definitely before the end of this year. And just a few words on the reason why we started working on this project. It started off with the member and community member surveys that were conducted by both organizations separately, but turned up some similar results. And what was interesting is that they both showed growing interest and growing use of open source preservation tools. And what we could see in the change of among the members of OPF was that all of the members were in 2019 using at least some sort of open source tooling. And among the community of the Dutch Digital Heritage Network, what was extremely interesting is that currently the open source tools that are being used amount to 24%, but those that are currently being tested and expected to be implemented in the near future come as high as 68%, which we thought was remarkable. And what was also important to us that, especially in the Netherlands, there were a lot of users who are just at the beginning of the journey of setting up their pre-ingest and ingest processes and starting to work with these tools. So it was very important for us to facilitate a tool that was accessible for those users. And this was one of our most important criterion to provide an easy way for organizations that just start to use such tools, so that they didn't have to go through the process of installing them before they could experiment with them. And this, as some of you may know, can be complicated either due to the particular IT setup within organizations, or just because simply some of those tools are quite complex to install for first-time users. And this was also one of the reasons why we decided to select the tools that have a graphical user interface. However, we are still debating whether we should also include some of the command line tools. So the first batch of tools that we have pre-installed, as we started with 4 tools, and that was Apache Tika, Vera PDF, Droid, and Jove, and now also Handbrake and Media Info were added. And I'll just briefly mention the criteria based on which we chose them. And they also derived from a long list that we received from the community survey. And based on the weighing and the criteria listed here, we arrived to the short list. So it was, of course, very important that they were open source, that they were popular tools with high demand, easy to use with good documentation, and that there were also tools that continue to be developed. We favored tools that were easy to automate so that the updates could be easily facilitated. We favored tools that were suitable for the environment that we chose to work with. And lastly, we wanted to create a stable environment, so tools with very complex dependencies were not selected for implementation. And now I'll hand it off to Carl, who's going to tell you more about the technical aspects.
Hi, could someone pass me the screen sharing, please? Perfect, thank you. Do you see my screen now?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, I sense we're fairly short on time, so I won't dwell too long. My name's Carl Wilson. I'm the technical lead at the Open Preservation Foundation, and yeah, I've been doing most of the implementation work for the project. Just a little bit about the supporting technology choices. For the virtualization platform, I used something called Vagrant for automating the virtualization. That just allowed me to create boxes, etc., and manage the box creation straightforwardly. VirtualBox as my base virtualization platform of choice, and those are both chosen because they're basically cross-platform, so anyone can produce the environments. You don't need any of these tools to actually run the environment necessarily, but you will need some kind of hypervisor and virtualization environment. But these were just chosen to allow anybody to actually create a version of the machine if they so wanted to. And then the final machine is actually exported as an OVA machine, and it should work in other hypervisors. We haven't tested that yet. The question I get asked a lot is why not Docker? And the simple reason was because we needed the GUIs. The whole idea was to provide a virtual research environment that allowed people GUI access, and Docker Docker doesn't support GUIs as well. I have some ideas for Docker going forward, but this isn't the right platform. And then finally, the automating the actual production of the provisioning, which is automating the production of the environment. I chose to use a tool called Ansible. It's fairly straightforward and simple. It uses configuration files and automates the production of virtual machines. I'll have a little bit more to say about that on the next slide. And then GitHub to manage the Ansible configuration files, the documentation, and the development and testing process. Finally, we chose Debian as the base operating system, mainly because of its reputation for stability. It does make it hasn't got as rich package systems as others, so it does mean we have to install some tools by hand, but the stability is good. It's currently Debian Stretch. We will look to move to Buster in the last part of the project, but we wanted something that was established and stable. Quick look at Ansible, because this is what should make replication of the machine by other people and maintenance by other folk easy. It's a provisioning system similar to Chef Puppets, used to provision machines to a template, so automate the creation of virtual machines. It's probably the simplest of them, and the upshot is we have a bunch of playbooks and some configuration files on GitHub, but it should mean that to upgrade a machine, a piece of software, you should only need to change one version number in a configuration file and reproduce the environment. It will be trickier than that if one or two things change with the tools, but yeah, that can be dealt with. It does simplify it. I won't say too much because I do sense we're short on time. But this can be played out to any machine running the suitable operating environment via SSH, be that virtual or physical. So you could use this to actually provision a physical machine. I'm not going to try to do a demo because we're too short on time. I won't go over this tool selection criteria because that's a shared slide with Anya. It looks a little like this. It's a standard Debian environment, but we've created a desktop which has a bunch of icons. You can start the GUIs for these tools. They're also configured in such a way that there's a toolbox with settings as well and other help that's available from the toolbar. So when you press the command key, you should get some help. And finally, they're all placed in such a way that you can actually search for the tools as well and run them easily. Finally, we do have some to-dos because we're not finished yet. Documentation of the environment maintenance is still to do. The tool help that's packaged comes with it, but we could do with packaging some of the websites for tools, etc., with the environment. Optimizing the virtual environment because it's just a bit big at the moment and there's some work we can do there. And then an external documentation site, probably on GitHub Pages. And I suspect I'm still in time and I'll hand back now.
If you could just wrap up now, that'd be great. Thank you.
I believe that's it. So
Oh.
just over to Anu to wrap up now.
Lovely.
Yeah, I thought that you were going to wrap up, so I think we are there.
That was great. Well, thank you both very much. And again, there's a lot in there, obviously, to unpack, a lot from a technical point of view. I don't know if I can't see any questions yet in the comments comments field. I had a question. I don't know, this is perhaps too early in the project to say, but have you presumably done some user testing? Have you had feedback on you know, how people are finding this? Because I'm guessing this is aimed for somebody like myself who is, you know, struggles a bit sometimes with the range of tools out there, and you know, you're packaging this up to deliver to someone so they can you know, get going on the tools. So have you had feedback from researchers or users on you know, how they're finding it so far?
We haven't done any external testing yet. We've done a first round just among our group of researchers that are close to the Dutch Digital Heritage Network, just to see whether everything works as intended. But yeah, we are keen on sharing the tool and receiving feedback from others as well. Yeah.
We're on the verge of a wider release now. I think we're just in the final round of testing, and the next round, which will be over within the next 3 or 4 weeks, but the next round will be more public.
Great. Well, really looking forward to that. It looks to be a really useful you know, tool to help get people moving, which is kind of what we're all about, encouraging people, a wider audience of people take part in digital preservation. So thank you very much for that. Right, so because we're still, I think we're still on track, hopefully. So I'd like to pass over then to our final speakers. So hopefully on the call we have Camille Tyndall-Watson and Cal Lee. Camille Tyndall-Watson from North Carolina Department of Natural and Cultural Resources, Cal Lee from University of North Carolina, who are talking about supporting email curation with natural language processing and machine learning, which is a really interesting topic. So great, fantastic. So we have them there, and the usual rules apply. You'll hear the little noise at 7 minutes, and then if you could be wrapping up at 8 minutes, that'd be fantastic. So without further ado, over to you. Thank you.
Sounds terrific. Well, thank you very much. Good whatever time of the day it is to everyone. So we're going to talk a little bit about this project called RATOM, which is a partnership between the School of Information and Library Science at the University of North Carolina in Chapel Hill in the US, and the State Archives of North Carolina, which is in Raleigh. So we're in Chapel Hill, they're in Raleigh, not too far from us, as part of the North Carolina Department of Natural and Cultural Resources. So the name of this project is RATOM. So RATOM stands for Review, Appraisal, and Triage of Mail. But it also quite conveniently kind of sounds like Ray Tomlinson. So it's a little bit of an attribution to you know, one of the pioneers of, so we can either, you know, bless him or curse him depending on our attitudes toward email. But this is a project funded by the Andrew W. Mellon Foundation. It's a 2-year project, and we're in year 2. And it's developing software for selection and appraisal of email using natural language processing. We're moving in the phase of the project more toward machine learning, which we're not going to be talking about too much in this presentation, but we're happy to discuss with others down the road or you know, after the presentation. The idea is to support iterative processing. By that we mean that with digital materials in particular, if you're engaged in appraisal, meaning, you know, the kind of the archival practice of determining what should be retained over time, it tends to be an iterative process, because as you run processes, you learn more about and can better characterize what the content is. So the idea is we want to have tools that allow people to basically find out more and more about what's in the collection so that they can start making determinations of what should be retained and also what might be sensitive and need further review or redaction. Also things like mapping timestamps, entity, and by that we mean named entity recognition from natural language processing tools. Sensitive features, meaning things that might be in need of restriction or further review, and other elements across various tools, and I'll talk a little bit more about that. It also extends workflows and activities that were part of two sets of projects, one being BitCurator, which was based out of the University of North Carolina, and Tomes, which was a project headed by the State Archives, so that makes our partnership very nice. These are the team members. So you're hearing from me right now. Again, I'm in Chapel Hill, North Carolina in the US, and Camille Tyndall-Watson will be speaking next. She's at the co-PI on the project and at the State Archives. We also have a terrific team of other people, including Antoine de Torse, who's a software engineer, Jamie Patrick Burns, and Sangeeta Desai at the State Archives, and also Alicia Kinder, who's the project manager and a doctoral student at UNC Sills. That's the School of Information and Library Science. And then finally also Cam Woods, who's the technical lead and has been working with me for a number of years at the University of North Carolina. And we've been working with a company called Cactus Group, which is in Durham, also very close to us in North Carolina. We have what's called the Triangle, which is Raleigh, Durham, and Chapel Hill. They have been doing work on the graphic user interface that Camille is going to be talking a little bit more about. So this is the final segment that I'm going to talk about before I hand over to Camille, and it's to point out a set of tools in this LibRayTom library that we have developed and adapted in order to do basic processing and characterization of email content. So using a fairly powerful set of tools called libpff that allows you to pull information out of PST or OST files. So those are the types of files left behind by all of these Microsoft email environments that so many people use. Some other Python software, also Spacy, which is a natural language processing tool. So the idea is that we process the email in a basic way. It pulls the information out of the headers and the sort of the content, identifies attachments and things like that. Runs Spacy, which is for named entity recognition, identifying things like names of people, places, organizations. And then writes all of these results out into a very simple relational database structure. So just an SQLite database, which then allows the products of these tools to be relatively easy to reuse and pick up by other tools, right? So we haven't designed any of this environment to be a place that you have to constantly revisit necessarily. In your tool chain, you can run these tasks as appropriate, and now you've got the information in a very easily kind of queryable, reusable format in the SQLite database. So as I hand over to Camille, she's going to talk a little bit more about the web interface that Cactus has developed in partnership with us, and that the State Archives in North Carolina has been doing experimentation with. So I'll go ahead and stop sharing my screen and allow her to do the same.
Right. Let's see. Cal, for some reason, Zoom is not wanting to let me share my screen. Would you mind sharing?
Okay, I will. Yep. Sorry, I'll bring it back up, and then you can just tell me when to click. So, sorry, let me bring it back up.
I also apologize for everybody getting to hear my daughter screaming downstairs.
Okay, so yeah, so sorry, go ahead and just, shout at me, Camille, when I need to advance.
All right, yeah, if you could go ahead and advance
okay.
that first slide. So good morning or afternoon or evening, everyone. So I wanted to walk a little bit through our iterative processing interface that we've been working with Cactus in Durham. As a way of doing iterative processing, we specifically were working with them thinking about records requests, since we hold public records in our archive. So as you can see, this is the home screen you would kind of see if you pulled pulled up the email account itself. So basically this tool imports email accounts from PST and runs some of the tools that Cal was talking about from LibRayTom to do entity identification. It'll allow you to create processing accounts associated with individual email users. You can associate more than one PST with that email user. What we found is that a lot of times when we're exporting email accounts, they're so large that they export as multiple PSTs when they're coming out of the system the state uses, which is Office 365. It allows for interactive review and tagging of the email messages within those accounts. So we can say if something's a record, if it's a non-record, if it needs redaction, if it needs to be restricted. And it also allows you to export selected messages as EML for retention or release. If you're interested in taking a look at the code, it's available at our GitHub, which is at the State Archives GitHub. If you could go to the next slide, please, Cal.
Oh, yep.
So here's the accounts view. This is what you would see when you are uploading your email accounts or your PSTs. So it's displayed here in this main interface. Account processing, which is the little green indicator there that you'll see by each name, indicates when the upload is complete for all entity identification or full text indexing. It also tells you, you can see the name of the person, the inclusive dates of the account, how many messages there are, how many PSTs are associated with that account, and how many are unprocessed rather in the account, and when it was last modified. So then you would click, if you wanted to open up one, those three little dots at the side, and next you would go to your individual account. So selecting an account displays an infinite scroll view of individual messages associated with that account. Green tags indicate entity classes that are identified during processing. There are also blue tags that can be associated with any given message. Those are user-created tags. So for example, if we needed to tag something as being attorney-client privilege, that would show up as a blue tag because that would be something that we created internally. There's also a status dropdown that allows messages to be marked for retention or redaction. This also appears in an individual message view. Currently, it defaults to open, but that's a bug that we're working on with Cactus currently. There might be some additions there. So once you click on an individual message, messages are tagged during ingest used with categories associated with entities identified within the body of text. So you can see here in this message, we have person, cardinal, organization, law, etc. This research data set contains prior annotations resulting in overtagging. So sometimes it's not as useful, but with the user-generated tags, that can be narrowed down a bit. There's also on the account view tagging and search, so you can select by classification, so record or non-record, date range, email addresses, any of the filters that we have available, you can kind of winnow down so you can, that'll help with a search for records retention, or just if you're only releasing things that have been marked as open, you can filter that way, filter by processed or unprocessed, etc. Next slide.
Could I get you to start wrapping up now, please?
Oh,
yeah.
sure.
Yeah. No, that's fine.
This is
okay.
right near the end here. Yeah, thank you.
Brilliant.
There's also an audit history that's in the background, just to see, so you can see who made changes and what changes they made for security and chain of custody reasons. And this is all the information, all of our links for how you can get to information about the Raytom project, including our code library and our web app. And that's Raytom in a very fast nutshell.
That was great. Thank you very much. And well, actually, can we have a round of applause for all our speakers, please? As we've heard from everyone here. Yeah. Yes. Very. Oh, nice. Yes. Very good. Very good. There's a few minutes for questions. I can see in the chat everyone is starting to discuss drinks now. Don't know what time it is in the world for some of you. Possibly a little bit early to be starting on the conference wine, but we've got a bit of time for questions before that. So we had a question, I think, for. Regarding this presentation, which was from Hannah Bosma, who asked about how does it deal with email attachments. So that's for Camille and Cal.
So just one quick answer to that is that essentially the tools that we've just talked about can work with attachments throughout the tool chain. Essentially, you can extract the content, you could run natural language processing against them and everything. The default is essentially just to deal with the content of the email itself, because once you start to look at the numbers, there's often essentially kind of an order of magnitude more content for the attachments than the content itself. So essentially, they're kind of two answers. The capabilities are there for the email attachments, but the default behavior that we have built in to the software is based on solely the content of the messages themselves, just because then with that iterative processing, it can happen much more quickly, because obviously processing of the attachments can be a bit more laborious. But,
yeah, and within the user interface, it doesn't display the actual email attachment. However, it will at least tell you the name of the file that's attached. So you at least know, if it's a useful file name. If it's image 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, it's not very helpful. But if it's a well-named file, it'll at least give you an idea of what that attachment is. But we just didn't have the time to work on displaying that full attachment in this round of development.
And probably for this audience, it doesn't require saying, but I'll say it anyway, is that obviously the format of the attachments is going to be an issue depending on what sort of email collection you're looking at, right? So obviously we don't have a magic wand that helps you deal with any possible format. So, but I'm sure that's pretty obvious to everybody. Hard formats are always going to be hard formats.
Thank you. And we had a question actually for a previous speaker. So I don't know if Carl is still around. I hope he is, because I got a question that came in actually by email to me, which was, I did put it in here somewhere, which just asked about are you publishing the boxes on the Vagrant platform? I'm going to pretend I know what that question means. That's why I'm hoping Carl's on the call.
I am on the call, yeah. Currently, we're not publishing them on the Vagrant platform, but I do intend to do just that. We've used the OVA image for testing, but actually making a Vagrant box from it and hosting that in the same place is not a problem at all. I'm not going to pay to host it on Vagrant Cloud, but I will provide the storage elsewhere and a link on Vagrant Cloud, I think.
Great, thank you. Thank you, Carl, for answering that. We had a more general question, which I think was from William. Actually, William, I'm sure you're there, and I'm sure you can ask your own question.
I will do. Listen, I know this is outside of the scope of RATOM, sorry, and I don't mean to put Carl and Camille unfairly on the spot, so I'm going to ask this of everyone in the room, really, but I might invite Carl and Camille to think first for us. Email preservation. Okay, there was a major fire in a tower block in London about 4 years ago where dozens of people were killed, hundreds just short of, and there's a public inquiry ongoing. It's called Grenfell Tower, and it's a really catastrophic incident. The public inquiry is now ongoing, and just last week it got to the engineer whose job it was to fabricate the components of the facade of the building. And much to the QC's surprise, much to the prosecuting attorney's surprise, all of the emails in relation to his work have been deleted. It seems to me that the components of a facade of a building, a tower block, where the compartmentalization of the building is key to its fire suppression, those emails are going to be very important. So as a default, people have asked me now, because it's kind of my profile in a way, quite a few journalists have come to me to say, what do you do when email's been deleted? What do you do when email's been deleted? And apologies therefore for putting you on the spot. Obviously this is out of scope for RATOM, but maybe there's experience you have, or maybe there's experience in this room which I could point to people to, examples of how there could be good practice to recover from a situation like that.
I mean, and I will say in just general terms, Camille might be able to speak a little bit more about what they're doing at the State Archives, is I would just point out that it depends a great deal on how the deletion was carried out, right? So, because obviously if it's on a disk and you're talking about a file that's in unallocated space, there are kind of forensics tools that can be used for that. If it's sitting in a PST file and it's simply in the deleted messages folder, that's probably pretty straightforward, right? If it's on the server and you're dealing with trying to pull it off in that environment, that doesn't get to any of the procedural issues, but I do think that, the technology is going to differ depending on what the deletion was, right? Essentially what place in the platform. Conveniently, there are a number of tools, all open source, that can help you with each of those scenarios. But I don't know if Camille had thoughts about what they're doing at the State Archives, or anyone else on the call, obviously.
Yeah, unfortunately with the State Archives, because we don't manage email until when it's an active record. We only get it when it's no longer active and the person has separated from employment. So most of our ways of dealing with that are all policy based with how we're dealing with our Department of Information Technology, who kind of is the steward of email and the email servers until it comes to us. In that right now, everything in the state of North Carolina is on legal hold, which is super not efficient. And we're trying to move towards policy that doesn't allow that. And it's just archival people who are creating archival records who are on legal hold, and everybody else will be deleted, which is also not super efficient, but what we have right now. So unfortunately, I don't know of any ways of recovering things that have been deleted, because right now, if somebody deletes something, it's still on legal hold in their archive, and we pull everything when we pull into our archive. But that's not really a technical solution so much as a policy one.
It does occur to me that I'm asking quite an extreme case, and of course, like all extreme cases, it's difficult to know the precedent. Also occurs to me that undeleting materials is ethically dubious for a lot of organizations, a lot of contexts that you might not, you might have the ability to do it, but you wouldn't do it. But I think this does qualify as an extreme case, and it does qualify probably as in a case where an investigating, solicitor or investigating authority might actually be in a position to do that. But I take the point. It's not a disaster. It's not necessarily that it's entirely lost. It depends on the type of deletion.
And aside from the technical issues, I can obviously only speak from the U.S. perspective. From a legal point of view, is that, as you say, William, obviously it depends kind of on whether you feel like you have the authority to undelete something. And I think, at least in U.S. case law, we kind of have this set of tiers where the level of accessibility, there's this set of cases, Zubilaki case that was a number of years ago. And so the idea is, if you have to go all the way back to a backup tape and recover it or something, right, then the threshold has to be higher. And so I think there's a similar thing going on here, right? If it's simply sitting in the deleted messages folder along with every other folder, that's probably different from the notion that you would have to go and carve it out using forensic tools to pull it off of a drive or something, right? I think the presumption that somebody intentionally got rid of it versus, it's still part of an active record set is probably part of that consideration as well.
I think that Neil Jeffries has his hand up.
Yep.
If you're there, Neil, yeah, do you want to
jump
jump in?
Right.
Yeah.
Okay. I'll say there are a number of companies that do data recovery from trash media, and they will be generally where you'd go to get forensic recovery if you need to get fragments of files back off a disk, because they can do very low-level scanning if they need to. Companies like OnTrack, and a few years back I developed some tools for another one which is now merged and gone elsewhere. But if worse comes to worse, they can actually dismantle the hard drive and scan the surface to get stuff out of it, depending what's been done. So there are levels of technology you can apply depending on how much criminal stuff is at stake. As I tweeted, though, I said the problem with criminal forensics is they tend to concentrate on the high value cases like financial fraud, and that's all modern technology. So they actually, within the police forces and the investigatory forces, they tend to have fairly modern skills and not ancient system skills, which tend to stay with the specialist companies.
Right, I think we've just got a couple of minutes left before the end of the session, so we should think at least about wrapping up. I don't know if anyone has a quick last final point or a burning question that can't wait. I think hopefully everyone is, that's been a fascinating session, and to be honest, I've got a lot of questions myself and a lot that I want to find out about all the projects I've heard about. So can we just ask for a final big round of applause again for all the speakers and for our co-chair and technical support there, who I have relied on greatly. Thank you all.